Hi everyone, this is Father Warner. We are in Friday, the fourth week of Lent, and the Gospel of today is taken from John chapter 7, verses 1 to 2, verse 10, and verse 25 to 30, and I'd like to read it for you. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He did not wish to go about in Judea because the Jews were looking for an opportunity to kill him. Now the Jewish festival of booths was near. But after his brothers had gone to the festival, then he also went, not publicly, but as it were, in secret. Now some of the people of Jerusalem were saying, Is not this the man whom they are trying to kill? And here he is speaking openly. But they say nothing to him. Can it be that the authorities really know that he is the Messiah? Yet we know where this man is from. But when the Messiah comes, no one will know where he is from. Then Jesus cried out as he was teaching in the temple, You know me, and you know where I come from. But the one who sent me is true, and you do not know him. I know him, because I am from him, and he sent me. Then they tried to arrest him, but no one laid hands on him, because his hour had not yet come. The Gospel of the Lord. So here is a 21st century observation that has really not changed ever since Jesus said it, and I'd like to read it again. It is from verse 28. You know me, and you know where I am from. I have not come of my own accord, but the one who sent me is true, and you do not know him. What is Jesus really saying in short? He is saying this. He says, we may know about him, hopefully, but do we really know him? There's a difference between the two. We may know about him, but do we really know him? And Jesus is a person who never minced his words. He said everything that he needed to say. We live today in a very politely affirmed society, and therefore we don't like negative strokes. But when you look carefully, Jesus never minced his words. The question is, should we spiritually spare the rod and spoil the child? When the Jews needed to be comforted, they were comforted by Jesus. But when they needed to be pulled up, Jesus pulls them up like he does today. Perhaps we have all got used to the image of the sweetheart of Jesus, and somehow we never want to accept the image of Jesus with a rod or a whip in his hand walking through the temple. So let's place this text in its context. If you read this text, you will realize that verses 3 to 9 are missing, and then we jump straight away to from 11 to 24 are also missing, and then we go straight away to verse 25. So 3 to 9 and 11 to 24 are not included in this text. So let me fill you in to what is really happening, because we need to always, as I say, place the text in its larger context. Jesus has left Jerusalem and he has gone to Galilee. And we know that he does this because the Jews are trying to find any reason to put him to death. And then we are told that there is an 8-day-long festival called the Festival of Tabernacles, or the Festival of Booths. And here is when our saga of knowing and unknowing really begins. And let me give you an example. His brothers, the brothers of Jesus, know him, but do they really know, they know about him, but do they really know him? And that's the issue. Why do I say that? If you look at verse 5, you will see that his brothers are asking him to go to Jerusalem so that your detractors may see your work, they may see your signs. And then that's their way of telling Jesus, why don't you go to Jerusalem and bask in your glory? Do some signs for them. They know about him, but they don't know him. Because we know that in verse 10, when Jesus finally goes to Jerusalem, he goes secretly, not to bask in his own glory, he goes very privately. He arrives in the middle of the festival of the tabernacle, of the Feast of the Tabernacle, or the Feast of the Booths as we've called, and he arrives bang smack into divided opinion. Look at verses 11, 12 and 13 of chapter 7 of the Gospel of John. You will find that some of the people there are complaining about him. There are others who say he's a good man, and then there are still others who call him a deceiver. Now that word is a very deadly word, because if you know, we use the word Satan, and Satan is not a name, it's really a title, it's an explanation of who he is. The very word Satan translates as deceiver. And they were calling Jesus a deceiver, which means, in short, they were calling him Satan. Now, to discredit him, and that's where we really come to today's text, to discredit him, the Jews decide to expose his lineage. And we see this in verse 27, where they say, they want to reveal, as it were, we know everything about you. They know his physical location, where he comes from, where he was born. And yet they do not know anything really deep down about his father or about Jesus. They know everything about him, but they do not know him. Jesus, on the other hand, won over the people with his teachings. Why? Because he touched their hearts in a very, very special way. In verse 30, we are told that they tried to arrest him, but they could not, because verse 31 tells us that many of the people in the crowd believed in him. It's a very crucial word. They believed in Jesus Christ. So, seeing his growing popularity, you can understand why the Pharisees and the chief priests begin to send the temple guards to have him arrested. We read this in verse 30. Why were they so afraid of Jesus? And this is the question we need to ask ourselves. Why were the Pharisees, the scribes, the chief priests so afraid of Jesus? And the answer is this, that people know about him and they are impressed. The crowds know about him and they are impressed. What would ever happen if they got to know him in their hearts? They would be completely won over, and the Pharisees and the scribes would have been completely sidelined. And this is where the real crunch time for us begins. This is where we need to ask ourselves this simple question: do we know about him, or do we know him? About him, we may know of him in the scriptures, in the Gospels, at Mass. We may know about him in catechism class. But do we know him, which goes deeper than a book, deeper than a homily? This knowing can never be second-hand. This knowing Jesus must always be our personal experience. And so I'd like to welcome you now to close your eyes as you get to know him, know Jesus Christ. God bless you, and spend the next few moments in silent prayer.